There's less than a month left until Hungary's parliamentary elections, and the race is heating up fast. While the opposition's trying to rally voters by highlighting their grievances against those in power, the government itself, led by Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, is increasingly warning citizens about an imaginary war if they lose. According to independent sociologists, the opposition party Tisza is leading the ruling Fidesz party by about 14%. However, government-run polls paint a completely different picture. In those polls, Orban isn't just keeping up. On the contrary, he's far ahead of his rivals. But what's even more interesting is not just how the Hungarian Prime Minister plans to use administrative resources to hold on to power. Even more important is that apparently the Kremlin is helping him, as it clearly doesn't want to lose a friendly and loyal regime within the EU. What efforts is Moscow already making to support Orban? And what kind of tactics is the Hungarian Prime Minister himself using? Let's break it down now. For the first time, it was openly stated that Russia might be helping the Hungarian Prime Minister stay in power by Peter Magyar, the leader of the opposition Tisza party and Viktor Orbán's main political rival, on March 7th. According to him, the Hungarian Prime Minister invited representatives of Russian military intelligence to Budapest so they could influence the upcoming elections. Later, Magyar also stated that Orbán's party, Fidesz, is preparing a large-scale campaign of discreditation and disinformation. According to the information he has, Russian political strategists were among those involved in developing it, and the main focus is planned to be on social media, first and foremost on the TikTok platform. There, falsified materials will be spread through a network of fake accounts. According to Magyar, the owners of such pages could be paid rewards of up to several tens of thousands of euros.
14 defamatory videos are already ready, created with the help of artificial intelligence about the Tisza party candidate and members of his family. These videos will be distributed through fake accounts for tens of millions of forints. I urge Viktor Orbán to immediately stop the planned series of election manipulations and expel Russian agents from Hungary. I am already stating that after April 12th, everyone who participated in these crimes will be held accountable in court. Peter Magyar, leader of the opposition Tisza party, on Facebook.
Investigative journalists from V-Square claim that Vladimir Putin personally appointed the first deputy chief of staff of the Russian presidential administration, Sergei Kiriyenko, to be responsible for this operation. According to the information obtained, it was he who 2 years earlier coordinated Moscow's interference in the presidential elections in Moldova. At that time, as journalists discovered, the Kremlin used an entire network of tools, vote-buying schemes, troll factories on social media, and local activists who spread discrediting materials against the pro-Western president Maya Sandu. Now, according to journalists, they are trying to repeat this scenario. Russian specialists, it is claimed, are working directly at the Russian embassy in Budapest under diplomatic cover.
Without a doubt, Russia is actively taking advantage of all this. In other words, they found a weak link. They're always looking for one. We remember what they did during the parliamentary and presidential elections in Moldova, what they did in the presidential elections in Romania, and what they periodically do during elections in countries like Germany and France, where they support pro-Russian, right-wing radical parties, actively investing money in them, actively creating conflicts, and taking advantage of certain regions. For example, there's Eastern Germany, the so-called former GDR. Of course, they're doing the same thing in Hungary.
The campaign by Orban and Putin is aimed at boosting the current prime minister's ratings while simultaneously destroying the reputation of Peter Magyar, the leader of Tisza, which is ahead of Fidesz in the polls. In this campaign, Viktor Orban is supposedly portrayed as a strong leader with some global friends, while Magyar is, and I quote, shown as a Brussels puppet with no outside support.
The administration of Vladimir Putin has approved a plan by the Kremlin-linked media consulting company Agency for Social Design. It is under Western sanctions and spreads, among other things, anti-Ukrainian propaganda and fake news. The main goal of this interference is to strengthen the position of Orban's ruling Fidesz party. This is achieved through a specially crafted information agenda. The messages are created in Russia but are posted on social media by supposedly influential Hungarians. From a Financial Times publication,
the Russian embassy in Hungary called the information about Moscow's attempts to interfere in Hungary's elections fake. And to make sure no one noticed Orban's cooperation with Putin, the ruling Fidesz party went so far as to accuse Ukraine itself of manipulating public opinion. It sounds completely paradoxical, but when you repeat false statements over and over, you start to believe them yourself.
The tricks that Orban pulls, he's been doing them throughout his political career. And I think Europeans are already very well aware of all this. And there are also mechanisms in place that we can't see from here in Ukraine. But all these mechanisms are meant to find some kind of balance within the European Union.
In fact, Ukraine plays one of the key roles in Hungary's current policy. Whenever Budapest faces any setbacks, Viktor Orban blames Kiev specifically. And moreover, he is categorically opposed to Ukraine joining the EU. Under the pretext, he says, that if that happens, listen up, Hungarian farmers will lose all their money and the Ukrainian mafia will rob everyone. And in general, a war will break out. Just take a look at these posters. The Ukrainian leader, the EU leadership, and the country's opposition are all portrayed as enemies of the people. By the way, there are so many posters with President Volodymyr Zelensky's face on the streets of Hungary that tourists are already joking he probably has a huge chance of winning the upcoming elections. Of course, we'll never know how many votes Volodymyr Zelensky could get in Hungary. But there's one thing we do know for sure. The Ukrainian president is ready to work with any leader of Hungary, as long as one condition is met.
No one can say what will happen if or when Hungary's leadership changes. We don't influence that choice, and we don't want to. We will work with any leadership in Hungary, with any Hungarian who wants to cooperate, live in peace with Ukraine, not interfere with our geopolitical choices, and be good neighbors. We are ready to work together in a friendly way, as long as this person's not an ally of Putin, that is, of the aggressor state. Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, during a conversation with journalists.
As usual, the worse Viktor Orban's support gets, the louder and more deceitful his statements become. Right now, independent polls show that Peter Magyar's opposition party could get 49% of the vote, while Orban's Fidesz party would get 37%. It's no surprise that at rallies, the Hungarian prime minister is campaigning so desperately for people to vote for him.
We have 28 tough days ahead of us. We need to win, not like we did 4 years ago, but even better. We don't just need as many votes as we got 4 years ago. We need a lot more. We need to revive our anti-war alliance, and 3 million votes shouldn't be our limit, but just the starting point. We shouldn't just reach that result. We need to surpass it.
There are only a few weeks left until the election. The struggle for power in Hungary is getting more and more intense. The opposition is trying to take advantage of the government's falling approval ratings, while Viktor Orban is betting on an aggressive media campaign, voters' fears, and external enemies. We'll find out very soon how this political showdown will end. But one thing is already clear. The upcoming elections in Hungary will determine not only the country's future in choosing between the West and the East, but also the balance of power within the entire European Union.